Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something real today, something life itself will teach you if you pay attention long enough. When a man goes silent, don't confuse that silence with peace. Silence is noisy on the inside. Silence is where thoughts argue with pride, where truth wrestles with ego, and where guilt refuses to sleep. A man can stop talking to you, but he cannot stop talking to himself. And that's where the real work begins. Silence doesn't mean indifference, and it never has. When a man goes quiet, it's not because nothing is happening inside him. It's because too much is happening at once. Silence is what shows up when emotions don't have a clean exit. It's the space where thoughts collide, where memories replay without permission, and where truth keeps interrupting every excuse he tries to believe. He may stop speaking to you, but his mind keeps talking nonstop, reminding him of what he felt, what he avoided, and what he risked losing. A man chooses silence when he thinks words will expose him. Speaking requires ownership, and ownership demands courage. Silence feels safer because it creates the illusion of control. He convinces himself that if he doesn't say it, it doesn't exist. Reality doesn't work like that. Unspoken feelings don't disappear, they settle deeper. They show up in his mood, his restlessness, his inability to fully enjoy anything new. Silence becomes heavy when it's used to hide from accountability. Inside that quiet space, pride and conscience start arguing. Pride tells him to stay firm, to look strong, to never go back and admit fault. Conscience reminds him of the moments that mattered, the effort you gave, the connection that felt real. Pride talks loud at first. Conscience is patient. It doesn't rush. It waits until distractions fade, until the noise of the world dies down, and he's left alone with his thoughts. That's when silence stops being peaceful and starts becoming uncomfortable. Every quiet moment forces reflection. He remembers the way you showed up when it wasn't convenient. He remembers the conversations he brushed off, the emotions he minimized, the chances he assumed would always be there. Silence becomes a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. They show him who he was, what he did, and what he failed to protect. That reflection can't be avoided forever, no matter how busy he stays. Distance makes emotions louder, not quieter. Without constant access to you, he feels the absence, not just of your presence, but of the stability, the encouragement, the understanding. That absence creates questions, and questions demand answers. Silence works until it doesn't. At some point, the pressure of holding everything in becomes greater than the fear of speaking out. A man can ignore messages, delay conversations, and avoid uncomfortable truths, but he cannot escape his own awareness. Guilt doesn't shout. It whispers, and whispers last longer. It reminds him late at night, early in the morning, and during moments when he's supposed to be happy. Silence stops being a strategy and starts feeling like a burden he no longer wants to carry. Eventually, the need for relief shows up. Relief comes from honesty. It comes from admitting what he felt, what he feared, and what he mishandled. Silence can pause the truth. It can't cancel it. The longer he stays quiet, the louder the truth becomes inside him. And when the truth demands air, silence breaks, because no one can live comfortably while hiding from what they know is real. A man's pride can delay truth, but it can never erase it. Pride is the armor he puts on when he feels exposed, uncertain, or afraid of admitting that he mishandled something meaningful. It convinces him that staying quiet makes him strong, that holding back words keeps him in control. Pride tells him that admitting fault looks like weakness, but deep down, he knows that avoiding truth doesn't make it disappear. It postpones the moment when he has to face it. Pride works best in the beginning. Early on, it gives him confidence. It helps him convince himself that walking away was the right choice, that silence was necessary, that he's better off not explaining anything. He repeats these thoughts until they sound believable. But pride has a limit. It cannot carry emotional weight forever. The heavier the truth becomes, pride starts to crack under the pressure. When a man truly cares, pride doesn't erase feeling, it competes with it. Every memory challenges his ego. Every reminder of what he lost weakens his certainty. He remembers the moments where honesty would have changed everything, where a simple admission could have prevented distance. Pride tells him to move forward without looking back, but memory keeps pulling him backward, forcing him to revisit unfinished emotions. The problem with pride is that it isolates. It convinces him to stand alone with his thoughts, refusing help, refusing conversation, refusing vulnerability. And isolation gives truth room to grow louder, without distractions, without validation, without someone telling him he was right. He begins to question his choices. He starts replaying conversations, analyzing tone, rethinking decisions. Pride can't silence reflection, and reflection is dangerous for denial. There comes a moment when pride stops protecting and starts suffocating. Pressure of holding everything in becomes exhausting. He feels it in his restlessness, his short temper, his inability to fully commit elsewhere. Pride tells him not to reach out, but his heart keeps leaning in that direction. That internal conflict wears him down because pretending not to care requires more energy than being honest ever did. Truth has patience. It doesn't rush him. It doesn't force itself forward. It waits until pride is tired. It waits until loneliness makes honesty look less frightening. It waits until he realizes that protecting his image cost him something real. And once he understands that, pride loses its grip. He starts seeing honesty not as weakness, but as relief. When pride fades, clarity takes its place. He recognizes that admitting the truth won't undo the past, but it will free him from carrying it alone. He understands that silence didn't make him stronger, it just delayed growth. At that point, the desire to speak becomes stronger than the fear of exposure. The words he held back begin forming clearly because now he knows exactly what needs to be said. A man doesn't admit everything the moment he realizes the truth. He waits until he's ready to let go of pride completely. But when that moment arrives, there's no hesitation. He reaches out because honesty becomes necessary, not optional. Pride may have delayed his confession, but it could never erase what he felt, what he knew, or what he owed to the truth. Guilt always looks for a door to escape, and no matter how tightly a man tries to lock it in, it finds cracks. Guilt is not loud at first. It doesn't rush him or force immediate confession. It sits quietly watching, waiting, growing stronger every time he pretends nothing happened. A man can convince the world he's fine. Guilt speaks in private. It shows up when distractions fade and when he's alone with his thoughts, reminding him of what he did, what he avoided, and what he knows deep down was wrong. At the beginning, he believes he can live with it. He tells himself time will erase the feeling, that silence will make everything settle down. But guilt doesn't disappear with time, it sharpens. The longer he avoids the truth, the clearer it becomes. Every memory returns with more detail. Every quiet moment gives guilt a chance to speak louder. It reminds him of the effort you gave, patience you showed, and the moments where honesty would have changed everything. Guilt has a way of disrupting peace. Even when things seem good on the surface, something feels off. He laughs, but it doesn't last. He stays busy, but his mind keeps wandering. Guilt creates restlessness because unresolved truth doesn't allow comfort. It questions his choices, challenges his excuses, and refuses to let him fully enjoy anything new. No matter where he goes, guilt travels with him. What makes guilt powerful is that it doesn't attack his image, it attacks his conscience. It asks quiet questions he can't answer easily. Why did I do that? Why didn't I speak up? Why did I let something valuable slip away? These questions don't demand immediate answers. They stay present, repeating until he can no longer ignore them. Guilt doesn't want punishment, it wants acknowledgement. Every reminder strengthens it. A familiar song, a memory, a late night thought, a moment where he realizes the connection mattered more than he admitted. Guilt connects emotion to truth. It forces him to feel the weight of what he tried to avoid. And the more he feels, the harder it becomes to remain silent. Silence stops being protection and starts feeling like a lie he has to maintain every day. Guilt also carries comparison. He notices the difference between what he has now and what he had then. He realizes that not everything can be replaced. Some connections leave an imprint, and guilt reminds him that he mishandled something rare. That realization doesn't come all at once. It builds slowly until the awareness becomes impossible to dismiss. Eventually, guilt looks for release. Holding it in becomes exhausting. The mind wants relief, and relief comes from honesty. Speaking the truth becomes less frightening than carrying it alone. That's when the urge to reach out appears. Not for attention, not for validation, but for peace. Guilt doesn't allow permanent silence because silence keeps the wound open. When a man finally speaks, it's not because someone forced him, it's because guilt demanded freedom. It needed air, it needed truth, and once that door opens, the words he avoided come out clearly because guilt has already rehearsed them 1,000 times in his mind. Distance forces reflection, and reflection produces honesty, whether a man is ready for it or not. When you step back, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop trying to be understood, you create space. And that space becomes loud, without constant interaction, without your voice, without your presence. His mind fills in the silence. Distance removes distraction, and without distraction, truth has room to rise. At first, distance feels like relief to him. He tells himself he needed it, that things were getting complicated, that silence would calm everything down. He believes stepping away gives him control. But the distance doesn't erase emotion, it magnifies it. The farther you are, the clearer your absence becomes. He starts noticing what's missing in moments he never thought twice about before. The support, the consistency, the way things felt easier when you were there. Distance sharpens awareness. Reflection doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in during quiet moments, late nights, early mornings, long drives. It shows up when there's no one else to distract him from his thoughts. He starts replaying conversations, not the ones where he felt powerful, but the ones where he stayed silent when he should have spoken. He remembers the chances he ignored and the emotions he avoided because they felt inconvenient at the time. Distance removes the option to pretend everything is fine. Without you there to absorb his uncertainty, he has to sit with it himself. Reflection becomes unavoidable. He begins to see patterns, his own habits, the way he pulls back instead of leaning in, the way he avoids vulnerability and calls it strength. Distance exposes behavior without judgment. It simply shows him the truth. As reflection deepens, honesty starts forming. Not honesty for the world, but honesty with himself. He admits things internally before he ever says them out loud. He admits that he cared more than he showed. He admits that silence wasn't maturity, it was fear. He admits that walking away felt easier than owning up to his emotions. These admissions don't feel good, but they feel real. Distance also changes perspective. When you're close, emotions are blurred by comfort and familiarity. When you're gone, clarity replaces comfort. He sees what the connection actually meant instead of what he assumed it would always be. Reflection strips away entitlement and replaces it with appreciation. He realizes that access to you wasn't guaranteed, it was earned, and he didn't protect it. Honesty grows quietly. It doesn't announce itself, it settles in and waits. It shows him that avoiding the truth didn't make him stronger, it only delayed growth. He understands that silence didn't solve anything. It just postponed the inevitable conversation. Distance teaches him that unfinished emotions don't disappear, just because you stop talking. At some point, reflection reaches a breaking point. Awareness becomes too clear to ignore. The truth he's been sitting with demands expression. Distance did its job. It removed noise, stripped excuses, and forced honesty to take shape. And once honesty becomes clear inside him, staying silent feels dishonest. That's when the urge to speak appears, not out of impulse, but out of understanding. When he feels the loss, he feels the truth, because loss removes illusion. While you are present, while you are available, while you are giving energy, effort, and understanding, a man can underestimate what he has. Familiarity makes value feel ordinary. He starts believing that what exists today will exist tomorrow without effort. But the moment that presence disappears, the reality changes. Absence doesn't whisper, it echoes. It forces him to notice what he no longer has access to and what he assumed would always be there. Loss slows everything down. It makes him pause in moments where he used to feel comfortable. The silence left behind isn't empty, it's heavy. He notices it when something good happens, and there's no one to share it with. He notices it when something goes wrong, and there's no one who understands him the way you did. Loss reveals emotional dependence he didn't want to admit existed. It shows him that what he called independence was often quiet support he took for granted. When the loss settles in, memory becomes sharper. He remembers details he overlooked before. The patience you showed, the consistency you maintained, the way you stayed when things weren't easy. Loss doesn't allow selective memory. It brings back the full picture, not just the parts that were convenient. And with that clarity comes realization. He starts seeing how rare it was to be understood without having to explain himself over and over again. Loss also exposes comparison. He notices the difference between connection and convenience. What he encounters afterward doesn't feel the same. Conversations feel shallow. Effort feels forced. And that contrast teaches him something important. Not everything can be replaced just because time moves forward. Some bonds carry depth that isn't recreated easily. Loss makes him understand that value isn't about availability, it's about alignment. When a man feels loss, he begins questioning his choices honestly, not defensively, not emotionally, but truthfully. He asks himself why he didn't show up when it mattered. Why he stayed quiet instead of speaking, why he protected pride instead of connection. Loss removes excuses because excuses don't comfort emptiness. The truth becomes clearer when there's nothing left to distract him from it. The truth doesn't arrive dramatically, it arrives quietly. It settles into his thoughts and stays there. It shows him that what he lost wasn't perfect, it was real, and real is rare. Loss teaches him that consistency is more valuable than excitement, and understanding is more powerful than attraction. These lessons don't come when things are easy. They come when something meaningful is gone. Feeling the loss also changes his emotional awareness. He becomes more sensitive to what he dismissed before. He recognizes emotional safety where he once saw routine. He understands the difference between someone who cared and someone who was simply present. Loss strips away entitlement and replaces it with humility. It teaches him that connection requires effort to maintain, not just effort to start. As the truth becomes clearer, regret follows, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet kind that sits in the chest. The kind that makes him replay moments differently. Kind that makes him realize how small changes could have led to a different outcome. Loss doesn't just hurt, it educates. It shows him the cost of silence, hesitation, and emotional distance. And once he understands the truth through loss, it becomes hard to stay silent, because silence feels heavier when you know exactly what you lost and why you lost it. The truth presses forward, demanding acknowledgement. When a man feels the loss fully, he can no longer pretend he didn't know what he had. Truth demands expression, no matter how long it's buried, because truth has weight and weight needs release. A man can carry it for a while, convince himself he's handling it, tell himself it's better left unsaid, but truth isn't designed to stay hidden. It presses on the mind, settles in the chest, and shows up in moments he didn't expect. He may think silence keeps him safe, but silence only delays the moment when truth insists on being heard. At first, he treats truth like a problem he can manage internally. He tells himself he understands what happened, that there's no need to reopen anything, that speaking won't change the past. But truth doesn't care about comfort. It cares about alignment. When what he feels doesn't match what he's pretending, tension builds. That tension follows him everywhere. It shows up in his tone, his patience, his energy. Truth unsettles him because it refuses to stay in the background. The longer